My colleague, Prosi Busagwa, left for a meeting, but I think she'll step back in. I had the daunting task of summarizing the discussion in Group 3. Group 3 is about aligning policies, regulations, institutions, and financing for a charcoal-free future. The theme was to examine the current policy, institutional, and financing landscape around charcoal regulation and clean energy promotion. So we had a set of guiding questions which we attempted to discuss. I will beg that the group permits me to put out all the, there were so many contextual explanations around this theme, and I hope I do the group justice. So I'll go one by one. The first question is, are current forest policies aligned with charcoal demand realities? So the first task was to actually identify which policies are in place. So what was shared in the group is the National Forestry and Tree Planting, the National Forestry Policy, which is supported by an act, the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act of 2003. And then we had the National Energy Policy, which is more recent, 2023 document. We had the National Climate Change Policy, which is also supported by a Climate Change Act.
So we looked at what these policies and acts provide in terms of utilization of charcoal. What was shared is the planning, the Forestry Act and Policy provide for sustainable planting and harvesting. However, charcoal is lumped as a forest product and does not stand out on its own. So it doesn't have the prominence that it should have in the Act and the policy. On the other hand, the National Energy Policy has given emphasis to clean cooking, and they've highlighted, I think, 6 policy areas. I will not mention all of them, but there is clean cooking, there is reduction of biomass, promotion of alternatives like LPG, increasing access to electricity, as well as the modifying the terrace structure where we're educated. They've put a cooking ban for domestic users and the institutional users. So those are some of the policies in place. The National Climate Change Policy and Act emphasized the nationally determined contributions, and they are very specific because they provide strategies for all actors that at the end of the day who have an impact on climate change, and they will specify what each institution is supposed to do as a way of reducing our carbon footprint. So are these policies sufficient? The answer was neither here or there. So members are like, yes, the policies are in place, but there are bottlenecks in implementation. A couple of challenges were highlighted, so I'll go ahead and mention a few of them. Misalignment in mandates, where different MDAs have different focus. For instance, the local governments will be looking at how much money can we generate from our natural forests, and they will resort to, charcoal trade. On the other hand, you have Ministry of Water, which will be looking at how can we, Ministry of Water, NEMA, how can we conserve the environment. The issue of corruption was also highlighted. That's along the entire value chain. Coordination between agencies. How does NEMA, for instance, how does NFA report to NEMA? both of them have a mandate when it comes to utilization of forests, but how do the two speak to each other? There was an issue of understaffing of agencies. Corruption again came up, especially field offices. Unclear enforcement of rules. This particular one has actually come up in the light of the presidential directive on charcoal, where everyone is enforcing what they feel like. The transporters know something else, the producers are kind of hoodwinked to fall with whatever information is given to them. And there's a redundancy in policies. This comes especially implementation of the PDM, where there's emphasis of mindsets, the mindset change stands out, but when it comes to what's the practice on ground, it differs, yeah? So we'll move on to the next question. How effective are licensing and the permitting system? The regulations and laws provide for these, but they are not well coordinated, especially at the various levels of government. That's central government, local government, and private sector is not well integrated. Local governments catch, usually the permits given at transportation, and they do not capture the production, and are also weak at the points of sale. So the next question was, what role can community-based forest management play? We identified that yes, there indeed are community-based forests, but they are not registered. An example of these are mainly common in northern Uganda and Masindi. And the reason these forests are not registered is because the function is domiciled in two ministries, Ministry of Lands and Ministry of Water and Environment. So there should be incentives given to the people who have, it's private land, but they have forests. And above all, there should be a chain of custody where products can actually be followed from point of produce to point of sale. The next question was, how can illegal harvesting be reduced without undermining livelihoods? One of the things that was emphasized was agroforestry. You already saw an example here from Kijani. So that's one of the things that can be rolled out in other districts. The other issue that seems also, that hasn't been operationalized is the tree fund. So the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act provides for the tree fund, but every year the budget passes, no money goes into the tree fund. Maybe I should also mention the Environment Fund, because it's in the same, it's a similar instrument. The National Environment Act also provides for a National Environment Fund that should go to conservation. And that money is collected, I think, in environmental levies, and they never trickle down to the conservation activities at the local government. We should strengthen regulations for the chain of custody from production, transportation, and sale. And then there is need to formalize charcoal from just any other forest product and give it a prominence in the National Tree Planting Act. That act, we noted, was also an old act, 2003. There's been an attempt to, when they were mainstreaming the agencies into the ministries, much as this act came up to now, that process has never been, the bill has not been assented to. So maybe that was the process that was supposed to have this started. Then overall service provision should be improved so that there is limited reliance on charcoal at domestic level, especially in the local governments. What incentives could encourage formalization?
guidance of how we move in the next 10 years. Second, we must expand affordable clean cooking alternatives at scale. My grandmother received, now this is possible, my grandmother received a gas set from Ministry of Energy. And thank you, Ministry of Energy, for supporting my grandmother. My grandmother called me after a month and said, you know what? Kindly send me something, I buy something to eat. I'm very hungry. I'm like, Grandma, what happened? He says, you know what? I didn't get to eat in the morning. Why? This thing is not burning anymore. I asked, what thing is not burning? It's like, this thing, even if I'm turning it up and down, but the thing is not burning anymore. And I told her, can you call me that girl you live with? And I asked what the real issue is. Then the girl told me the gas was over. I asked them, how much is it to refill this thing? They didn't know.
Because I had to send the Boda guy and find out and all this. The Boda guy told me my grandmother needed 100,000 to refill that thing. So I kept asking myself, where will my grandmother be getting 100,000 every day, moving away from the charcoal she buys at 70 to filling a gas cylinder at 100,000 every month. It really, for me, while I was very happy that my grandmother now can cook inside the house and all this, I think it also created a burden on her head that then we had to pick up. So, as we expand affordable clean cooking alternatives at scale, this must be in reality of the people that we live with, their incomes, but also their capacity to sustain clean energy. So, the issues the group has mentioned about, targeted subsidies, tariff adjustments and incentives, private sector partnership to expand distribution networks for clean energy and alternative fuels, must be live to the realities of my grandmother and your grandmother, who we are advocating to move from charcoal